As promised, I'm going to do a video on some initial thoughts as well as follow-up information on the Uvalde active shooting that took place at this elementary school at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. My criticism stands. If proven wrong because of circumstance, including information and facts that come out, I'll let you know. You'll be the first to know. But as of right now, my criticism stands that the law enforcement officers, including initial and first responders on the scene, including the chief of police who later showed up, and most every officer that arrived outside of BORTAC and the federal agencies that arrived, were completely incompetent and dereliction of their duty and likely civilly liable and likely criminally liable. Now, here's what I'll say about the specifics of the lack of training and how it translates to what took place. Training is one iota of the overall issue that took place. I think more importantly, the discussion should be on the culture of the Uvalde Police Department, the leadership of the Uvalde Police Department, and their inability to do anything, including save children's lives. Those lives could have been saved by the actions of arriving officers, by the leadership displayed by arriving officers, and by planning and tactical execution of their standard operating procedures that exist in their department. All along the timeline. All along the timeline. Over an hour from the time that the suspect entered the building at 11:33 till the time in which federal law enforcement officers that are border patrol agents, not an FBI regional SWAT team, not the FBI's HRT, but border patrol agents are the ones who arrived and who ended this active shooter that somehow manifested itself into a barricaded shooter. Here's some breathtaking details that came away from the conversation that I had with a federal supervisor who has intimate understanding because he supervises a lot of those officers that were on scene, but understands the totality of the circumstances that took place. One, the classroom doors were never locked. Even upon request of getting the keys, at the time in which officers breached the door at 12:50, they didn't have to use a breaching tool, ballistic breaching SOPs, or explosive breaching SOPs, because the door was unlocked. I know that because the officer who's the supervisor told me they simply opened the door. Two, my criticism of BORTAC of not understanding why they would wait so long from 12:15 to 12:50, 35 minutes before they breached the door. There is a reason for that, which I was explained by the supervisor. None of the federal agents who arrived, who are border patrol agents, by the way, none of them were given the information outside of there was a school shooter barricaded in the classroom. They didn't even think or know that there were students inside the classroom or that anybody had been killed or injured, according to this source. Let me say that again. No information was relayed to the federal agents standing by, waiting to breach the door, that they were going into a situation where innocent lives were lost, innocent lives were potentially injured. They had none of that information. They were literally waiting for the deliberate operation to take place because they thought it was a single shooter in the classroom alone. That all changed when they entered the classroom. When they entered the classroom, the shooter came out of a closet and began shooting at them. As they began shooting at them, most of the assault force never entered the room. Three brave men of BORTAC, operators, went inside that room with one ballistic shield and put down that bad guy. 3. There's a meme going around of a guy with a ball cap who's wearing a plaid shirt. He never entered the classroom. A round went through the drywall while they were staging during the engagement, and he never entered the reach point. I don't know if that's because of cowardice, that's because of fear, or that's because of tactical SOPs. But I know that 3 brave men went to that classroom and faced off with that scumbag active shooter by themselves. I believe it's an hour, 33 hour, 26 minutes or something like that. All of that time, he had time to prepare, to barricade himself in a position, to ambush those law enforcement officers. Their shock, their surprise when they opened the breach point and they said they see dead children everywhere. That was a surprise because they didn't know. And those officers are testifying. They didn't even know. If they knew, they would have went in. I know they would have went in because I was surprised that there were subsequent shots fired and no officers hastily went in. It's because none of the information was relayed. The chief of police wasn't even in the fight, completely checked out. What we should be asking for at this point is the camera footage of all the other positions of what the officers were doing in those positions. Because I think something deeper and darker is going on. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's corruption. I think it's culture. There's no way in hell that a law enforcement agency would be that incompetent on accident. Not saying it was on purpose like they intentionally did it, but I'm saying the egregious acts of not acting seem intentional and malicious. Why would you not carry a radio as the chief of police? Why would you not set up an incident crisis center and start relaying, communicating as a leader as the chief of police? Why wouldn't any officer step up and do anything to allow these federal officers and agents to know what was going on? There's a post that went out recently about the poor officer who lost his wife and was getting texted, who happened to be looking at his phone. From my initial evaluation, and you guys can correct me in comments below if I'm wrong, that officer is one of the 3 initial officers that arrived in the hallway that never went down the hallway to that classroom door. So you could feel bad for him because he lost his wife. I do. That's it. But at the point in which he was relayed that information, when he was standing in the hallway, I believe it's the same officer that was standing in the hallway at Sewell. I criticized him for standing in the hallway at Sewell while an active shooter, they heard the gunshots when they arrived. He just sat there and he did nothing. So we could sit here and talk about context. We could talk about criticism. I'm not talking about the point in which he looks at his phone, because I'm thinking obviously he's not playing words with friends. He's doing something looking on his phone. But he's in the hallway where if that's his wife is 100 feet away. 100 feet away, still alive. Because that's the last part of this. The 2 teachers, both of them were still alive, according to my source. Both of them were still alive over an hour and 20-something minutes after they were shot. They were still alive. One died in an ambulance, one died in the ER. Again, if that's not accurate information, you have the ability to reach out to me via the contact, let me know, or anonymously report that information. But from a supervisor that has intimate understanding of everything that took place, both of them were alive. So the question should be, what does that mean? Well, for me, it means getting out there and training law enforcement, using these mistakes that were egregiously made and helping law enforcement pick up the pieces, because the next active shooting could happen right now. We have to refit, we have to reorganize, we have to be better than we were before. For the families, for the victims' families, for the victims that lived, for people of that area that were involved, lawyer up. The civil liability, the criminal liability, those egregious mistakes fall on that chief, on that lack of leadership. So we need to hold these type of situations and the people who make the egregious mistakes accountable, just like we should in every phase, every step of our governance and legislation, from politicians down to chiefs and sheriffs of police departments. We should be doing that. There were not only mistakes made, but seemingly egregious and malicious mistakes made. If you didn't hear the initial review because it was too long, let me remind you, according to the alert report, which is a very good report of all the factual information, including the breakdown of the mistakes and the recommendation, there was an officer who had the shooter in his sights that asked for permission on his radio, according to the report, it seems like it's his radio, to engage the suspect. Then ask again, turning to his supervisor to ask again, and whether that was a yes or no, he went back to his sights and the suspect had already entered the classroom. Into an unlocked door, into an unlocked classroom door, and murdered 19 children and 2 teachers. All I'll say in closing this out is we as a society should be talking about this. We shouldn't let it die. We should be actively communicating about this in a narrative to make each other better, including the institutions that you pay your tax dollars to, the first responders that are responsible for showing up, protecting and serving our community, and to you, a responsible citizen who should never outsource your own security. Never. That's where we go forward from here. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you for all your feedback. If you have any information or any additional comments, leave them below. I appreciate you, even given these difficult circumstances. Something that just came into my mind. For all those people continuing to take up for the law enforcement officers, I don't get it. There's no excuse. I love law enforcement officers. Thank God 3 brave BORTAC federal law enforcement officers had the courage to enter that room under gunfire and put that piece of shit down. It's brave men and women that do their job every single day that I would do anything for law enforcement. But based on the facts, on the circumstance, on the timeline, and all of the information that I'm receiving from sources, this was more than just a mistake. And if you're not communicating that via your platform because you happen to be a former law enforcement officer, you happen to be a patriot, you happen to want not to criticize those that are responsible for these egregious acts, shame on you. Shame on you. I assume that you'll lose all credibility when it comes down to it. And also for the people who are upset because of my emotional rants, I don't know what to do for you besides find another preparedness company. This is what we do. I run and operate a preparedness company, and I'm not deviating. I'm not woke. And I won't be woke for anyone. If you don't like it, find another business, because that's what it is for you, is a transaction. For us, it's a culture, it's a mindset, and it's a movement. Till next time.